Hi guys, so I'm making this video last minute because I made the wrong video. I did the wrong test this morning and then I made the wrong video, so now I have to make this one. I kind of jotted down some notes, so I'm going to read it, and I'll just do my best from there, okay? So the sliding filament theory explains that explains muscle contraction by saying that within muscle fiber, thin actin filaments slide past thick myosin filaments. And mind you, my pronunciations are really jacked up sometimes. So this causes the sarcomere, don't quote me on that one, to shorten and thus the muscle to contract. So this occurs when the calcium ions bind to the troponin and expose the actin binding sites to cross bridges that attach and pull the actin inwards, and then it's fueled by the ATP energy. So actin is a thin filament. It's a sliding filament and it contains binding sites for the myosin heads. And then the myosin is a thick filament. It's a stationary filament that has heads out on them that bind and they create a bridge. Then you have the sarcomere, don't know, my pronunciation's bad. It's a functional unit of muscle fiber. So it's where the sliding filament movement occurs. Then you have troponin and troponamycin. These are the proteins that the actin filaments that we spoke about earlier, the thin ones, they regulate the exposure of binding sites for the myosin. And then you have your typical calcium ions. So this is essential because it helps with the muscle contraction, and then the binding of the troponin to expose the actin binding sites, not to be confused with action. And then you have your ATP, which is just a energy source for your muscle contractions. So the steps of muscle contraction, or the sliding filament theory, which is what we're talking about, has several steps. So first, the first thing that happens is your nerve impulse arrives. So a motor neuron releases the ACH, acetylcholine, we're just going to refer to ACH so that I don't jack up the word all night, to the neuromuscular junction, so the MSJ. This triggers the action potential in your muscle fibers. So then the calcium is released, and it's released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum, I believe is what that one was. And then your third step would be the binding site exposure. So the calcium binds to the troponin, which causes troponamycin to shift and exposed to the actin binding sites like we discussed earlier. So then you get your cross-bridging formation, where your myosin heads attach to the exposed binding sites, and then they form the cross bridges. Then you have your power stroke. So this is where your ATP, which we discussed earlier, was your energy source for muscle contraction. So your ATP is hydrolyzed, and it releases the energy that causes the myosin heads to pivot, pulling the actin filaments towards the center of the sarcomere, which is where we jacked up earlier. So then you go to step 6, which would be detachment, and your ADP is released, and a new ATP molecule binds to the myosin head. This allows it to detach from the actin and then repeat the cycle. And then you get into step 7, which would be your muscle relaxation. When your nerve impulses stop, the calcium is actively reabsorbed into your sarcoplasmic reticulum, don't quote me, causing troponamycin to block the actin binding sites again, and the muscle then relaxes. So it's a lot to take in because it's a lot of words, but it just basically suggests that the mechanism of contractions of striated muscles make the actin and the myosin filaments, they have to be precise, and an overlapping would result in the shortening of the fibrous length.